Right. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I have a very, very special guest on the show today. It's probably going to be better if he introduces himself because I probably won't be able to do it properly. But let me just mute that. Sorry. But he's a guy who's been around in dissident right circles, in white nationalist circles, or in alt-right circles for a long, long time. One of the founding fathers of the alt-right, an old friend, or perhaps an ex-friend, I don't know, of Richard Spencer. And he's got two websites, which I've put in the links below, Trad News and The Affirmative Right. And he's an Englishman, and he's living in Japan. And welcome to the show, Colin Liddell.
Yeah, hi, Brutus. It's very nice to be here. I've been watching your content for a while, and I think you produce, very reasonable and well-balanced videos. And thanks for that introduction. The site Affirmative Right was actually the founding site of what's now known as the alt-right. The alt-right was sort of founded in 2010, and that's when I started contributing. And then in 2012, myself and Andy Nowicki were made editors of Affirmative Right. Then in December 2013, Richard Spencer shut down the Affirmative Rights, the Alternative Right site, because he thought the term alternative right was jaded and out of date. And then myself and Andy Nowicki, we refounded the site as a blog spot and have kept it going ever since. And then in 2018, I decided that the alternative right had basically died a death, and it had been compromised too much by agent provocateurs and shills and useful idiots and so on. And it had been basically turned into a kind of caricatured form of neo-Nazism. And so I thought that the term was therefore more harmful than helpful. So I decided to rebrand the site as Affirmative Right, and to also change the approach of the site, which was to make people more aware of the ways in which dissident politics is subverted.
Right. So you're focusing now more on tackling the controlled opposition. Would that be right?
No, not really. I mean, I don't really like tackling the controlled opposition because it's sort of a bit like a dog chasing its tail. It's a bit pointless at the end of the day. I think people should be aware of how, especially nationalist or identitarian movements, are routinely subverted by people who don't want to see them do well. And that's clearly happened in the case of the alt-right. When the alt-right got started 10 years ago, there were a lot of kind of very respectable, decent, sensible people involved. It was a very intellectual movement. It was developing very, very effective critiques. It was undoing decades and decades of censorship. And it was, it was a real movement. And then you started to see the kind of troll element take over more and more. And it became all about trolling people on social media and using shocking memes and increasing amounts of Nazi imagery. And that started to, proliferate and dominate, mainly through sites like the Daily Stormer. And there, of course, this is one of the obvious things that everybody should know by now. The Daily Stormer has traded in very, very extreme neo-Nazi, anti-Jewish imagery, and it's well known that at least one of the main people there, Weave, is a complete Jew. The same thing with TRS, the Right Stuff. Again, the Right Stuff, it started off as a kind of sensible libertarian group of people who were discovering identitarian issues, and then from there it radically escalated into K words and N words all the time. and because of the because of the kind of the wit and the talent associated with TRS, it dragged quite a lot of people with it down that particular route. But there again, we know that Mike Enoch is a self-confessed Jew. So you have these very, very strongly neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic groups which turn out to be run by Jews, which is obviously an extremely suspicious thing. And is this the main thing to consider is not who's behind anything, because anybody can be behind anything, and it's very, very hard to clarify who's doing what sometimes. But the thing is that a very productive way of pushing a positive white identitarian and Western civilizational message? And once you go down that route, basically you just end up self-ghettoizing. So you actually do what they're telling you to do with the coronavirus. You kind of socially distance yourself from everybody.
Yeah. I have to say at this point, I mean, I was only very vaguely aware of you back in 2016, but I really used to hate you and Andrew Nowicki and who's that other guy, Ramsey Paul, and other people of your or in your circle or of your caliber who were complaining about the Stormer, because I was a big Stormer fan back in 2016. And Andrew Anglin used to publish my videos on his website, and I was very proud of that. Yeah, and I was very proud of that. But the thing which did it in for me with the Stormer was, it was the Weave incident. Basically, it was the Paul Nealon Weave incident, the whole thing with Ricky Vaughan. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows the story, but I mean, basically, we had this character appeared called Paul Nealon, and he's going for office, and all of a sudden he starts talking about the Jewish question and starts talking about white identity on Twitter. And everybody was excited. Everybody was like, wow, this is it. We're breaking through into the mainstream. And he was the hero. And then, because I don't really follow the gossip online, so I was just la-di-da-di-da. And then 2 or 3 months later, all of a sudden, everybody hated him. And they were all stabbing him in the back. And I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? And then it all comes out. There's this Ricky Vaughan character and Weave, and they're colluding together, and they're attacking him and slandering him and dividing the right. And then Hunter Wallace does a hit piece on Weave, and it all comes out that he's a Jew. And I just felt utterly betrayed by these people who I kind of basically trusted, and it was just exposed that Andrew Anglin was just lying, totally lying. And not only is he lying, but all of the big leaders of the movement completely failed to deal with it in any kind of adult way whatsoever. It was just totally swept under the carpet. It's like, no, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to punch right. We're not going to rock the boat, make any problems or anything like this. And it's like the whole thing just continued. And it's been completely forgotten. And it's like we had these, it wasn't just Paul Nealon, it was Patrick Liddell as well, trying to get elected. I mean, this is my whole point. It's like we can't just sit on the internet forever. We have to seize power, which means people need to try and get elected, no matter if it's viable or not. We need to start learning to try to seize office, So you got Patrick Liddell out there burning the Israeli flag and trying to get elected and doing something on the streets in real life. And they all completely ignored him, just totally ignored him, like he's not there. Do you know what I mean? And then it clicked in my head. It's like, oh, these people, they sit on top of the movement in a leadership position. And then if anybody comes up and actually tries to get anything done, they'll just stab them in the back and slander them and divide the movement and et cetera, et cetera. And so I started talking about this, and I'm now a little bit of a persona non grata in these circles. And yeah, that's it. So I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about the whole Paul Nealon, Patrick Liddell issue?
When was that exactly? Was that 2018?
That would have been end of 2017, beginning of 2018.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that period, yes, that'd be the kind of optics debate period. Is that right?
Yeah, after Charlottesville. Charlottesville was at like what, November 2017. Then everyone started.
Well, I think it was the summer. So yeah,
All right,
August.
summer. Yeah. And then everyone started talking about optics, and then Paul Nealon appeared, and there was a massive optics debate.
Yeah. So the timelines are very, very important in these cases to kind of figure out what's going on. And so you had the alt-right, which was various kinds of people involved. There was a kind of social group dynamic where people were getting pulled in a certain direction by dominant personalities. That was something I was aware of very, very early on, and really opposed from the beginning. Which meant that my site and people associated with me lost a lot of traffic and so on. But you had the movement going towards this increasingly toxic imagery, and thinking thinking they're having a great laugh. You had idiots like Richard Spencer, basically, recycling Nazi aesthetics and Nazi imagery and Nazi rhetoric with these, Hail Trump stuff. And, there's all sorts of other things I could point to there. And then you had the Charlottesville Unite the Right with the torchlight parades, the blood and soil kind of rhetoric and so on. And, they all thought they were having a great laugh. And then there was the big reaction to that. There was a massive amount of deplatforming that happened. My own site got taken down by Google for several months, and we had to move to a WordPress site for a bit, And then suddenly in October, after an appeal, they reinstated the site. So there was a lot going on there, but I think you had a massive amount of deplatforming, and so the nefarious actors who had pushed the alt-right in that particular direction, they kind of realized that they'd gone too far, and it was a case of the frog no longer being boiled, because what's happening is the alt-right is the frog that has been slowly boiled towards greater and greater toxic neo-Nazism. So it starts out as a legitimate critique of lots of problems in Western society and demographic changes and all sorts of various problems that we're all very concerned with. It starts out like that, and then gradually they slow boil the frog towards greater and greater neo-Nazism. When you get to Charlottesville, you have this sudden shock where the establishment clamps down, and a lot of sites start getting demonetized and deplatformed. And so people in the movement then start to think, oh, fuck, what are we going to do? This is really going to interfere with my with my site that I've built up, or my channel that I've built up. And so then there becomes this very organic concern about optics. And then the people who are kind of subverting the movement then think, okay, we have to go with that. And then you have somebody like Patrick Nealon, who's, he's actually parodying the very process that people like Anglin and Enoch and Spencer and Johnson had been facilitating before. He's doing it at a more extreme level, and especially he's doing it at a very bad time, you could say. So of course they all turn on him.
Right. I mean, the thing is this. I've never considered myself to be like a full-on neo-Nazi or anything like that, because I'm not a socialist, and because, I could appreciate the whole thing about Hitler. I mean, it's all very interesting, the esoteric side of it, and the swastika and the runes and all of this, and the fasci aesthetic and everything. It's all very nice and everything, but I never really considered myself to be a neo-Nazi. But at the same time, I do appreciate the kind of trolling kind of nature that Pol has, and I appreciate the memes that come out, and they're kind of like they're savagery, if you know what I mean, because it is very it is very kind of attractive and fascinating, and it does wake people up. So I'm not really against the neo-Nazi thing at all. I mean, my feeling is like, if people want to do that, then they can do that. I don't have a problem. I very much have a live and let attitude to these things. What bothers me more than that is the infighting, and it's when people try to say, it's when people try to kick each other out of the movement. It's when, like, I've had a lot of problems, like people are saying, don't talk to Brutus, he's bad optics, he says this and he says that, and it's not the right image that we want, and yada yada yada, and do. And my attitude is just like, well, you know, I'll talk to anybody, right? I'm English, I have freedom of speech, I believe in liberty, and I'll talk to anybody about anything. So I mean, when it comes to the whole neo-Nazi question, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are going to be a lot of people that are attracted to that, and that's just the way it is. And I just feel like instead of attacking them head on and saying, no, stop doing that, that's dumb, you should just have more of a live and let live attitude to these people, and just say, okay, look, it's funny, but you're not going to get elected with those kind of memes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to push now. I'm just trying to wake people up and say, look, guys, I mean, I understand you love Adolf Hitler and everything, but if you hate Winston Churchill, you're never going to seize power. You know what I mean? So maybe you took the joke a little bit too far. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Well, it sounds very reasonable, but then, you know, the problem is that, you know, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about people who want to play around with extreme toxic memes, which is, you know, like you say, it is funny. It is a bit of anonymous fun on the internet and so on. And then you're also talking about having a movement that can, you know, present a normie-friendly message. And those are two completely different things. And if those two things are conflated, then one thing is going to poison the other. You know, the 88 always drags 14 down.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, but I don't feel like I can attack these people head on, because I'm one of them, if you know what I mean. Like my whole thing about the bulldog nationalism thing is that, I mean, I've only really jumped on this thing during the last month, right? I've always defended people's right to wave the swastika around if that's what they want to do. I never thought it was a path to victory, but I believe in freedom of speech. If that's what they want to do, that's what they can do. But what's really bugged me in the last month was, you know, in reaction to Brexit and the Irish election, some people, well, I mean, Morgoth made a video and he was attacking bulldog nationalism, and he said, that he thinks the Union Jack is old and stale and this kind of thing. And it was really just the straw that broke the camel's back, because I've seen a lot of kind of anti-English sentiment in white nationalist circles for a long time. And I've seen a certain kind of Germanophilia and just like a worship of the German race and the German people and Hitler. And I always thought it was a little bit silly, but so I thought I'd take a stand against it. And so I said a few nice things about Churchill. And then all of a sudden my comment section is exploding with angry people, and people are attacking me and telling me to shut up and saying blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And, you know, sending little private messages to people in my group saying that they shouldn't associate with me anymore and this kind of thing. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. It's like I thought we were all on the same side here. I thought we were all English nationalists, but it's like all of a sudden you pull back the curtain and you realize that, no, actually, there's a lot of people in this movement that really genuinely are National Socialists. And they really don't like it if you say, you know, Bomber Harris did nothing wrong, or you say that, you know, Hitler started the war and it wasn't Churchill's fault, and they get really, really upset about it. So it's just kind of like a new, I guess, just like a new realization for me, which is why I'm doubling down on it, because I don't feel we should be ashamed to be English, you know. But at the same time, I don't yeah, I can't just get angry with people for loving Hitler, because I've been there myself, and I just feel like we're all on a path of knowledge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who, I mean, I think there's a whole sort of web of memes and false historical ideas that all kind of link together. And the idea that there's several ideas that are all interlinked. For example, is the idea that the Jews started World War II. There's the idea that Churchill was a warmonger who was in charge of the UK, even though he wasn't brought into the cabinet until war started, and he wasn't prime minister until I think April or May 1940. There's the meme that the bombing of Dresden was the worst atrocity ever. Germany had already been defeated, and blah blah blah. You know, so there's all these false ideas. Another idea that is linked is the Soviet Union was run by Jews during World War II. You know, so there's so many things that link together to support these ideas, and that's then used to push nationalists and identitarians towards a toxic Nazi point of view, as we see with the British Groyper movement, as it's sometimes called, people like Morgoth and Millennial Woes and so on. And they're unthinkingly recycling all these false memes. They're not looking into them and seeing if they're actually true. Did the Jews actually start World War II? How did they do this? And this is all based on this, I think, a 1933 newspaper headline. People are not doing enough serious, hard work looking into that. And so on Affirmative Right, we've had several articles that have actually looked in greater depth at the historical reality behind some of these false ideas. So, you know, as long as those ideas are in circulation, you have a lot of young, naive people who are going to be sucked in and pushed down that particular direction. And the idea that Hitler is somehow cool, and the Nazis were great fighters. World War II is pretty exciting in a lot of ways. I mean, if you switch on, I think it is the History Channel, it's more like the Hitler Channel, you know. So there's a lot of charisma. That particular movement, it's more like a kind of aesthetic, artistic movement as well, because it's the aesthetics are very strong, and that has a strong appeal to a certain type of alienated young white Western person. But the thing is, it really is a siren song leading people in a self-destructive direction, both personally and collectively.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I sympathize, because I've been there myself. It's kind of like you discover the whole racial identity thing, and you discover the Jewish question, and then you look back in history and you see, well, there's this German guy who stood up and said something about Jewish power, and also he was proud to be white. I mean, he wouldn't have called himself a white man. He would have called himself a German. He was more of a German supremacist than a white supremacist, but he was at least proud to be who he is. And it's, you know, if anybody in our culture, stands up against immigration or anything like that, then you end up being called a Nazi. So I can understand how people come to the conclusion where they just say, well, I am a Nazi then. You know, it's like doubling down. It's like, I'm not going to apologize. I am a Nazi. And it is effective to a certain extent. But the problem is when you take it too seriously, you know, that kind of attitude has its limits. I think 4chan and even the Daily Stormer, to a certain extent, has been very, very successful at waking people up to white identity and the Jewish question. It's just that it has a limit. You're gonna go a certain way, and then you're gonna hit a brick wall, and you won't go any further than that, because the general public, they're not going to get on your side. if you are, like a full-on fan of Hitler. So you have to kind of get over it. Do you know what I mean? You have to just get over it and realize some historical facts and realize that Churchill didn't start the war and it's not our fault. And Churchill was not fighting for multiculturalism. And if we're going to have a nationalist movement in this country, then you can't hate Winston Churchill. You can't do it because nobody's ever going to follow you.
Yeah, well, I think there's a kind of symbiosis between the left and the kind of Nazi-tarred alt-right. Basically, they are a reflection of the left. The left says, if you don't accept every tenet of multiculturalism, then you're a Nazi, and that's basically what the retard alt-right is actually fulfilling that part. It's a complete false choice. You don't have to. The choice is not between accepting every tenet of multiculturalism, globo homo, and being a complete Nazi-tarred stormerist. That is not the choice. That's the choice you have to reject. And you've got to say both of those choices are very bad for me and very bad for my people. And I don't accept either of those choices. And why am I being offered only these two choices? Now, a lot of people go for the kind of the Nazi-tarred thing because they can't accept the mainstream multicultural globo homo bullshit, But the thing is not to be kind of manipulated in that self-destructive way. The thing is to reject both of those fake choices and to do your homework and to establish a position which puts you in touch or potentially puts you in touch with a much larger number of your own people.
Yeah, it's almost like with the white nationalists, it's like they've swapped Hitler and the Holocaust for Churchill and Dresden, right? It's like for ordinary people, Hitler's the most evil man that ever lived, and the Holocaust is the worst thing that ever happened. But for white nationalists, it's like Churchill was the most evil person that ever lived, and Dresden was the worst atrocity that ever happened. And it's just so fascinating for me because I've been moving in these circles for years. Many of the criticisms I've said of Hitler, I've said many times before. Many times before, I've said that he started the war. Many times before, I've said we need our own English movement based on English philosophy. Many times I've talked about the Anglosphere and I've said that we're already really powerful and we don't need Europe or we don't need to worry about Europe. Let Europe sort itself out. Many times I've said all of these things before, but it was only when I actually said, Churchill did nothing wrong, all of a sudden people started getting really angry. It's almost like you have to hate Churchill to be part of this movement.
Yeah, people do need a hate figure. History seems to back this up, and the kind of multicultural system that we have dominating the West, their hate figure is obviously Hitler. He's the Emmanuel Goldstein. That's the character in Orwell's 1984, which they used to have. I think it was is it the 5 minutes of hate, or was it 15 minutes? I can't remember. But they used to have a kind of thing where they all frothed at the mouth for a few minutes every day, and so Hitler is that to people who buy into the kind of blue-pilled globo homo view of things. And Churchill is increasingly becoming this kind of demonic hate figure for people who think of themselves as red-pilled and on the identitarian right. And that's just a demonstration of the degree to which people can be manipulated and subverted. Because once you start casting Churchill as the ultimate evil, you've got zero chance of doing anything except existing in an ever-shrinking echo chamber online.
Yeah, it's really quite something. So
yeah, these social dynamics though are so toxic. And so, to actually have a sensible grip on things, you have to be a little bit antisocial and even misogynist to a certain degree. You've just got to if you just go along with the herd, sorry, I'm misanthropic, but if you just want to go along with the herd, and most people do, most people who are attracted to the dissident right, they are feeling a bit alienated, a bit lonely. The kind of archetypal example of that is somebody like Millennial Woes, who was very depressed for many years and sort of isolated and living in his room after, coming back from art school in London. And so he started to, emote online. And so these people, they do need comradeship. And so they're very susceptible to the group dynamic. And I've had an entire life outside the alt-right, and I'm not the sort of person, the typical kind of young kind of incel type of person who spends a lot of time on the internet and who's a bit lonely and alienated. So I'm not susceptible to those forces. So, but I can see how they can tug at people and pull them in certain directions, and these social dynamics are proven to be extremely toxic and self-defeating. And I think we have to, for any movement to progress, you've got to look at how things work, and you've got to look at the this dysfunctional social dynamic that is basically preventing the dissident right, which has all the best ideas littered around somewhere, has all the best ideas, and it has all the solutions to all the problems, and has all the best insights, and is an absolute necessity as a kind of critique and curative of Western civilization. You've got to stop those that self-defeating toxic behavior, dragging down those very, very valuable insights that we've accumulated over the years.
Yeah, my solution to this problem is to live stream, basically, because I think the way that they deal with people who rebel against them, the way that these, I don't know, perhaps you don't like the term controlled opposition, maybe you don't think it's been done deliberately or not, I don't know, but whatever the case, these big e-celeb leaders who run this movement, who people follow, the way they deal with people who disagree with them is they like to isolate them. It's a case of isolate and destroy, as far as I can see, by just telling people don't talk to them, right, and don't associate with them, don't go on their show, la-di-la-di-la-da. And that's very demoralizing, because it's like, well, not only do you have to fight against these huge titanic globalist forces that are trying to genocide the white race, you've also got to fight against the white nationalist movement as well, So my solution is just to live stream, basically. And I'm slowly building a live stream network. I've got my show on the Sunday. There's a show on a Monday by a guy called Cyborg. There's a show on a Tuesday by a guy called Hemi. There's another guy which has just appeared called Scuggy, who's doing a show on a Wednesday. So we have a very kind of, like, in our little circle, our little gang, if you like, we've got a kind of laid back kind of pub talk kind of attitude to things, where you like, we don't really do prep or anything like that. We just turn up and just moan about stuff for a couple of hours, and that's really the live stream. But it keeps it nice and laid back. It keeps it informal and friendly. And so there's a group, and we're always kind of trying to invite people in and just trying to be welcoming and so on and so forth. And I think that is the solution. Otherwise, I mean, I was quite lonely for a year when I first had my falling out with Millennial Woes and Morgoth and all of that. I mean, I didn't talk to anyone for like 6 months, and I thought, and it's a little bit, it's an awful situation to be in. But I think the solution is live streaming and just having your own kind of little gang of people, because people are social animals and they don't like to just follow one leader. They like to follow a group, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty reasonable. But it sounds also a little bit unfocused. And, I think we've got to really identify the pitfalls, and we've got to eliminate the extraneous things that don't really, which in many cases don't have any importance, and in other cases have lots of negatives. And the fact that we're having these debates about, who really started World War II and what should we think about the Dresden bombing. That's absurd. We shouldn't be fighting over stuff like that. But that stuff is put there to make us fight and to disagree and to become useless and dysfunctional. So I think we've got to really become more focused, and we've got to start nailing things down. And we've got, because we're basically just we're just arguing about the color of shit basically right now. I mean, that's not exactly a sort of firm foundation for pushing out into the normie sphere and converting the masses. And so anybody, the problem is, like, anybody who kind of starts Nazi whispering or Nazi signaling, that's obviously they might be sincere people. They might actually genuinely think that Hitler was quite a nice bloke and he didn't really do too much wrong. They might just be historically illiterate. So that's a possibility. I don't want to say everybody's a Fed or a shill, but there's a lot of naive, idiotic people in any movement, and they are attracted to certain narratives and ideas for various emotional or symbolic reasons, etc. But, we've got to see this for what it is. This is something that allows the movement to be infiltrated by bad actors. And also it allows the movement to be shown in a very, very bad light and to really, really limit its ability. So when you have somebody like Morgoth going on about how Churchill was a right bastard or cunt or whatever, and Hitler actually had some, actually had a very good program for building the autobahns. When people start to say those kinds of things, you get a sense of where they're going to go. Like, first of all, they might start with something very, very small, and they might say, yeah, actually, National Socialist economic policy had some, good points, and maybe that's true. But once people start like that, that's called the thin end of the wedge. And before you know it, you've got people marching around with fucking torches at night and Sieg Heilen, and the media are all over it, like shit on a pig. And then nothing positive is going to happen out of that. Now, if we look at the case of Europe, there are a lot of positive things going on. There are nationalist or soft nationalist parties, at least getting into parliament, in some cases influencing governments. And part of the reason for that is because following World War II, following all the kind of bad blood created by World War II and the Nazis, overt Nazi bullshit was just outlawed in most of those countries. You couldn't really talk about the Holocaust. You couldn't really talk about, you couldn't use certain Nazi symbols and so on. And all that was just automatically outlawed. So in a way, the left in that case, they were actually doing our work for us, because they were getting rid of all that divisive, toxic, negative bullshit that, as we see in the Anglosphere, we've managed to, immerse ourselves in and negate our message.
What do you feel about the European Union, by the way? Do you think it should be destroyed? Because this is another reason why I'm a little bit annoyed at the moment, because I was always operating under the assumption that the European Union is our enemy. We want to break it up. We want to see the rise of nationalism again in Europe. But it seems some people want to build a pan-European empire, and they want to see it carry on and continue. I mean, perhaps your old friend Richard Spencer would be an example of this. So, I mean, where do you stand on the European Union? Do you want to destroy it, or do you want to keep it going?
Well, it all depends, doesn't it, really? Because if you had a very, very large, aggressive country to the east, then Europeans would actually have to club together to make sure they didn't get dominated or colonized or whatever. So there is, if you look at the way the world is developing at the moment, you have several large superpowers. China's an obvious one. America's still there. You have Russia, which might be a superpower at some stage. And there's even the possibility that one day the Muslims might get their shit together, possibly led by a resurgent Turkey. Who knows? But if you have these aggressive powers which threaten which threaten Europe, then Europe obviously needs some kind of unity. As for the European Union, the way we managed it, I think the European Union, most people would say it was pretty okay until about 1990, and then something happened, which was the reunification of Germany and the decommunization of Eastern Europe. And what that did, it really put Germany in the driving seat. And then soon after that, you had the Maastricht Treaty, you had greater centralization of Europe. You had the scheme for the launch of the euro currency, and then that was soon after followed by the membership for various Eastern European countries, and all these trends placed Germany right at the center. There's the dominant power of Europe, and so at that time it kind of stopped being a kind of club of relatively equal European nations, and it started to become much more of a German dominated thing, and that really rubbed British people up the wrong way, and they weren't really aware of exactly why it was happening, but they started to get increasingly uncomfortable in the European Union. So I think in a way the Brexit vote was the right decision. We're not really that Britain is in a pretty comfortable position geopolitically. We're not really directly threatened by any major power, and so probably leaving the EU gives us a lot more flexibility of how to deal with things, and we'll see where that leads. Because right now there are a lot of things to be concerned and worried about. But I think it all depends upon the necessity for increasing amounts of centralization and unity, and whether we can get away with avoiding that or not.
Yeah. Do you think Russia's going to be a threat? Because I've got different people. It's such a polarizing issue, the Russia question. It seems like most people on the alt-right, or what is left of the alt-right, seem to think that Putin's some kind of hero. And then every now and again, I stumble across somebody who says, no, Putin is awful. Moscow's full of Muslims. Putin's daughter is married to a Jew, and he's funding the alt-right, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. What do you think about the Putin question? I haven't made my mind up on this at all, actually. I've got to be honest with you.
Yeah, Russia is historically, Russia's always been a bit of a threat to Europe. It's always been a very large, powerful country. The Tsarist Empire was a massive military power. They had a very strong expansionary tendencies. The British felt they had to kind of oppose those in various ways. We sided with the Turks and the Japanese in order to do that. And then, of course, the Soviet Union was a rebooting of that kind of Russian threat. And that was a very serious threat. So, Russia is in a position where it's a massive country. It's got a lot of land, a lot of resources. It's very underdeveloped compared to most parts of the West. But it could become a threat. It's not a threat at the moment, but it could become a threat within 30 or 40 years, depending on how the country's managed. There's also it's also tied in with China. I think China's possibly more of a threat in global terms. One of the things about the coronavirus, it spread to Italy in particular. And that was because Italy has very strong economic links with China because of the China's Belt and Road Initiative, which Italy is a sort of associate member. The Italians are the only G7 country to actually sign up to the Belt and Road Initiative, and that means they have a lot of Chinese people living and working in Italy, which is why the coronavirus became such a big thing there. And so it's, Europe's very easy to divide. It's very, when you have these large powers, they can play off one country against another. And in fact, this is something, Britain was actually very good at doing for its own, greater security interests. We played off one European country against another. And now we're no longer big or important or rich enough to do that. But a country like China or a country like America would be able to do that. They would be able to, cut a deal with one group of Europeans against another group. So these are all major issues that Europeans have to be aware of and, come to some sort of consensus on and evolve some sort of defenses against.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue for a return of a division of power in Europe, because I don't really want a giant European superstate sitting on my doorstep. But anyway, I'd like to ask you, seeing as you know Richard Spencer, I mean, what do you think of this conspiracy that, he's an Alexander Dugin fan and he's a crypto communist and et cetera, et cetera. Apparently his wife was a disciple of Alexander Dugin and translated a whole bunch of his books and et cetera, et cetera. Is he some kind of crypto Russian Eurasian communist, or what's going on there?
Spencer's just a very naughty boy, really. He's always he just likes to be edgy. I don't think there's nothing really constant about him. I mean, there are certain ideas that he repeatedly comes back to, but yeah, he was a big I mean, basically, like when Obama was in power, right. You have Russia Today. Now, Russia Today is the kind of Russian propaganda TV news thing. They have really great content, George Galloway and Alex Salmond, etc. But when Obama was in power, Russia Today used to bring Spencer onto their shows, because they were the thing about Russia Today. They always want to stir up the opposition in any country. They want to promote division. So in the case of America, if you have a left-wing president like Obama, Russia Today will speak to the dissident right-wing figures. And in those days, they used to promote Spencer. And of course, he had this Russian Georgian wife, Nina. They're now divorced. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Spencer was very interested in the ideas of Dugin because Russia Today was promoting him, and he had a Russian wife. Nowadays, he's not really so interested in that because Russia Today now focuses on the left wing in America. They promote left wing narratives, the Bernie Bros, the Black Lives Matter, that sort of thing. Anything to divide America. So a lot of these things are related to very, very fluctuating circumstances. And, I'm not sure that Richard really has a very strong ideological core. Right.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't want to bash him too much. I mean, I have my little Richard Spencer rants every now and again. I mean, I just feel like he was a bit of a disappointment. Never wrote a book, never did a decent documentary, failed to keep the MPI going, failed to build any kind of in real life organization. And there was so much political energy released in 2016 with the alt-right and so on and so forth. You would have expected him to make more of it, but he hasn't even written a book. So just kind of disappointed with him. Now he's hanging out with Keith Woods, who just appears to be another communist. And I'm just I'm just wondering, like, how many commies are there in the white nationalist movement? I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah, in the case of Spencer, really, he doesn't have anywhere else to go, because in the American system, all the alt-right had was this possibility that Trump might be their guy. And there's nothing else. It's like the Democrats, Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or whatever they come up with. And, the Republican Party, they're, Donald Trump is picking up a lot of support. Okay, maybe he's our guy. Let's go for that. And then it turns out that actually he's not really your guy, is he? So where do you go? And now, Richard Spencer, he keeps signaling to the Chapo Trap House people and the Bernie Bros and, Tulsi Gabbard or Andrew Yang. It's actually quite pathetic in a way, that what the alt-right has been reduced to.
What do you think of socialism? Are you a socialist, or do you lean more towards libertarianism and capitalism, or what do you think of that?
Well, really, I'm for whatever works in any given situation, and that will vary according to all sorts of factors. And sometimes I think you need a lot more free enterprise, and it's more meritocratic, and people with good ideas will, and good habits will make things that work, and that will be better. And then sometimes you do need to have a kind of collective approach to certain things. So some things are natural monopolies and so on. So I think it really is, case by case sort of situation, and it will vary with the circumstances. So I wouldn't really typecast myself as being dyed in the wool in either of those categories.
Right, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm leaning towards more of a kind of, I can't think of a word for it. Liberal monarchy, libertarian monarchy, something like that. Small government, but with a king at the top of it. Because I don't know, I'm not into the whole socialism thing. I don't like the idea of, the whole thing about the NHS and the public education system and pensions and all of that. It's like they pretend it's free, but it's not free, because they're just taking money out of my pocket and spending it for me, if you know what I mean. So I'd really kind of like to move away from that kind of that socialism.
Well, yeah, the problem with socialism is it tends to be done very, very inefficiently, and it's very, very wasteful. So it's like, can you actually have efficient socialism? That's the big problem. And I think occasionally you can, but it probably you need somebody like Stalin in charge, and people have to be shot if they fuck up and things like that, Capitalism is a bit more effective at providing socially acceptable rewards and punishments, I think.
Yeah, quite. And I just feel like it's probably more appealing to the kind of people that are going to be on our side anyway. I mean, people on the right, I mean, that's the divide, right? The left is socialist, the right wing is capitalist. And, the left wing wants to remain, the left wing wants more mass immigration, the left wing wants more homosexuality. People on the right want Brexit, they want more capitalism, less government interference, etc., etc. So we may as well side with people that are already on our side instead of trying to appeal to socialists or left-wing socialists who hate us all already. That seems to make sense to me.
And also the whole issue of left and right is being completely skewed by racial politics. So, I mean, if you have a monocultural, monoracial state, then, it's fine to kind of experiment with different things, different ways of running the economy or the social services. But as we've seen in many cases in countries like Britain and France and so on, the sort of welfare system becomes a prop for refugees and migrants from third world countries and various kinds of criminal underclasses and so on. And so we're no longer able to have that kind of purely ideological debate about things. It's all become ruined by multiculturalism, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we're moving into the last 5 minutes of the interview. Do you want to tell us, what's your vision for the future? What are your plans, Colin Liddell? Where are we going?
I don't think it's wise to have too many plans. There's too many unpredictable things. I think the main problem that I've noticed is that there's nobody really in charge of the world. There are powerful groups. They don't all agree. They often fight with each other. They have divergent interests. But the total effect of all this is that we're living in a very kind of blind civilization. And it's, it doesn't really know what it's doing. It doesn't really have any clear end point or focus or goal. And I think that is the problem. And I think the way forward is really to develop a kind of civilizational consciousness, and to have an elite that shares the interests of the people of that civilization or that country. We're a very, very long way from there. Most people are behaving in, understandably self-interested ways. I don't want to use negative words like selfish, but people are very self-interested, and that's because they don't actually believe that things are being run for a greater good. There's a lack of a greater good, and that's very, very obvious with the demographic trends, this absurd focus on the stock market, and very, very materialistic indices of well-being. And it's unbelievable that in countries which have effectively a fertility rate of 1.5, which means a 25% drop in population every generation, no major political parties are actually even mentioning this as an issue. It's absurd that we live in such a obviously dysfunctional civilization. And we struggle to actually get this message out and to wake up people, because we're so immersed in our own petty dramas and our own pointless quibbles about really quite irrelevant points and topics.
Do you feel like there will be a religious solution? Are you a religious man, Colin?
Actually, I'm not atheist. I'm worse than that. I'm a fidelist. I don't actually believe that people who say they believe in religion. That's what I actually believe. I think it's possible for somebody with a relatively low IQ to believe in some of these Abrahamic religions. I think that's possible. It's possible that there are some sincere Muslims, there are some sincere Christians, but if you ask me, like, is Nick Fuentes a sincere Catholic? I would say, nah, I don't buy it. He's obviously quite bright. He's got a high IQ. It's a bit of a pose for a lot of people. I think religion is a form of insincerity. And wherever I see somebody trying to advance their message under the flag of religion, I always smell a fraud.
So you're not a big fan of E. Michael Jones, then, I take it?
Well, I think I quite like his content. I find the whole Catholic Groyper thing amusing in various ways. But no, I mean, I don't take it seriously. I don't think E. Michael Jones is a serious intellectual. The idea of logos, and which is just words,
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a massive kettle of fish.
That's a bombshell, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I would disagree, but I've only got 2 minutes left in the interview, so I don't know if we can.
Better not, then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I think we should be able to do what's good for us without having some sort of convoluted, over-elaborate belief system that might actually be ultimately very, very flawed. I mean, there is a lot of things wrong with Christianity. There's a lot of things wrong with Catholicism. Catholicism basically produces a kind of pedo priest cult. And so, really, is that what we have to subject ourselves to, just to get the kind of basics of civilizational survival? It seems a kind of convoluted way to go about it, in my opinion.
Well, a lot of people find a lot of comfort in religion, though, and I would argue, I suppose, ultimately, there's no smoke without a fire. I mean, if you've got not millions, billions of people around the world getting on their knees and praying, they must be experiencing something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But I mean, you're perfectly welcome to disagree on that, Mr. Liddell. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and a pleasure having you on the show. And Yeah, it's really good to catch up, basically, because as I said during the course of the interview, I really used to hate you, back when I was a big Daily Stormer fan, and
I don't try to be lovable anyway, you know.
and then it's like a few years down the line, you scratch your head, you think, wow, that Colin guy, he had a point all along. So I do appreciate you coming on the show and having a chat, and you're always welcome. And I'm sure some of the other lads will invite you on their live streams for a bit of a chit chat if you want to. I know there's obviously a big time gap because you're in Japan. But anyway, it was nice speaking to you, and I'd be happy to speak to you again at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you, Brutus.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show. And well, usually I say good night, but I guess I'll just say good morning. And thanks to everybody in the chat. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Boom.